Hi, I'm Randi Altman with postPrespective. Welcome to our conversation about predicting the future of post. I'd like you first to meet our panel, and I'm going to have you guys introduce yourselves and tell people a little bit about your company before we dive in. Josh, do you want to start?
Sure. Hi, I'm Josh Senior. I'm the CEO of Senior Post. We are a post-production facility typically based in Brooklyn, New York. What we're going to talk about today is where we are now and what we do. We are really known for three primary things, which is dailies, offline, and deliverables. I act most often as a post producer on our work, and I've had the pleasure of getting to work with all of our fellow panelists. Katie, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Katie Hinsen. I'm the EP at Nice Shoes for Dailies and DI. So we handle mostly digital intermediate for episodic and features work. And we are largely based out of New York, but we do have locations all over North America. Glenn, do you want to go next?
Sure. And I'm glad you're introducing me, Katie, because I just wanted to thank you for bringing me to the panel today and being in this little box. I super appreciate it. And it's awesome to be here with everybody. With that said, my name is Glenn Schloss. I'm a co-founder and partner at FlavorLab in New York. We're an audio post-production company. We specialize in, we mix feature films, independent documentaries. We have a music division. We write theme songs for shows and do a lot of underscoring as well. And we have a music catalog as well that we represent about 350 composers. And so we really, we pride ourselves on being a Swiss Army knife when it comes to all things audio posts. And with that, I'm in.
All right, Dave.
My name is Dave Zeevalk. I am the VFX Creative Director and Head of Creative and Technology for Break and Enter, which is a branch of Nice Shoes. We are theoretically located in multiple locations, headquartered in New York City. However, Break and Enter is a fully cloud-based remote VFX arm of the company, and we focus primarily on episodic and feature films.
Fantastic. Thanks, guys. So before we look ahead, I think we need to look back. And it's almost a year already where things got a little wonky. So why don't you all just tell me how your companies transitioned to remote workflows, safer workflows, and because that's going to lead us to where we're going. So who wants to jump in? Katie, do you want to start with that?
I can start. We were kind of fortunate because Nice Shoes has a very large, significant commercials department. We do color and finishing on commercials. And they have been doing remote workflows for over a decade now, particularly remote color grading. It's pretty common in the commercials world. And so for us, we just kind of had to deploy that at a larger scale. So we're really fortunate to already kind of have that going. And so, yeah, we just kind of sent everyone home with the equipment that they needed to get their home studio set up, had engineers go around and check for security and things like that at their homes, just give them what they needed. And they remote into the studio. So that's how they do it. They just have their peripherals. They have their color panels, monitors, and mouse and keyboard at home. And everything else is on-prem in New York or wherever their particular studio is based. Wherever their machine or color bay is usually based, that's what they're remote into. And then for the client, they have remote viewing on an iPad or a calibrated monitor at home, and that's done over the internet.
Great. Dave, I want to jump to you because you're cloud-based, but before you get into it, I just wanted to remind everybody that's watching that they could submit questions to the panel via the Q&A box. So we encourage it, please do. Dave, why don't you tell us a little bit about how this all affected your company?
Yeah, sure. So for me, a little different in that I actually started with Nice Shoes, Break and Enter during the pandemic. So, Katie can speak much better for how that initial migration went for the company. But one of the things that I've been brought on for is to help them continue to expand this visual effects division, Break and Enter, but also basically getting that department deployed into the cloud. So when I started, we were initially connecting to on-prem Nice Shoes New York, and by about 45 or 60 days later, we had our team migrated over to AWS. where they're all remote connecting in the same fashion as Katie spelled out. It's no different than remote connecting into on-prem machines. Instead, we have these cloud-based machines that hold all our storage. Artists basically get a video stream back to them. It's gone really successfully. You know, and I think it was a very natural evolution for Nice Shoes because they've already been involved in this remote type of workflow, to kind of look at the new technology now and how we can push that further. So we're having a lot of fun developing. It's working really well for our team, and we're hoping that we can start to deploy it out to more pieces of the company so everyone can take advantage of this technology.
Fantastic. Now, Josh, you have a studio in Brooklyn, but when the pandemic hit, you went remote. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. In March, we took 2 shows home, and both of them had really different requirements. I think what's different about our experience from the Nice Shoes story is really that in the offline environment, we were adapting from having, large groups of people come together and collaborate across a series of suites to migrating that work home in a way that felt very haphazard and rushed in the beginning. It was sort of like, okay, well, everyone take your computers home for 2 weeks and we're going to give you watermarked proxies to edit on. And then we realized we needed something more sustainable. So we started looking at the resources that we already had available to us at Post. By virtue of the fact that our facility is spread across a few floors in the building that we're in, we were already leveraging secure VPN access to different servers in different spaces. And we started expanding upon that in a way that felt really low tech, user-friendly and natural, but also gave us the content protection requirements that the various networks that we were working with demanded. And the fix for each show was very different depending on the way that the offline workflow was designed. So in some cases, not being able to start these things during the pandemic, we were obligated into some choices that were made based on being in the room together, and being able to adjust and adapt to that did have us recalibrate a few times as we went. But being a Post house that's been built on a very low tech footprint in a way that anybody can come into and feel like they have command over without any mystics in the machine room, we've been able to sort of take that style of work that we've been evangelizing in person and replicate it across a few different remote configurations. Now we are starting shows, fully remote, where we are pre-building and shipping out kits. Sometimes we are accessing virtual machines on premises, but more often than not, the common denominator is really our server, which we access through a few different ways, depending on the needs of the show. And then obviously with us, for clients and producers and showrunners, we're conducting a lot of that in-person approximation through Evercast and video chats and things of that nature.
Very good. Now, Glenn, you come at this from the sound perspective, which is a little different world. So why don't you talk about how this all worked for you? Were you able to mix from the beginning, or was it more editing and creating music?
Sure. So similar to Josh and some folks on the panel, we were in the middle of jobs and we were mixing shows. And so I think certainly I was a little concerned about how that transition would work out. And it was pretty seamless. It was pretty seamless being caught in the middle of a show and having to recalibrate some of the studios and go remotely. We had a beautiful footprint on 23rd Street, 23rd and Park in Manhattan. And, this pandemic hit and we had to pivot. And ironically, our lease was up in August. So when things were happening, it was very fortuitous for us. We got very lucky. And the mixing at home, it's been fairly seamless for us. I was nervous about approvals, about clients not coming in for the final mixes, but the feedback after the first round of giving people mixes was, hey, this is, I can have my cup of coffee in my kitchen. I'm listening to the mix at my own leisure. I'm not on a clock in a studio paying for time. It was really nice to get that kind of feedback in the initial round of doing this. And I have to say also, closing down 23rd Street was such a bonding experience, I think, for all of us at the company, because it was all hands were on deck. I would come in one day to move things. Eric would come in the next day. Brian would come in from Connecticut to move things. And it sort of became a bonding experience for all of us to come together. And I think also when this hit, I was thinking, my first thought was, do I have the right team in place? And I'm a little nervous about this. Immediately, I realized that I'm working with the right people. Everybody had my back. I had everybody's back. If I needed anything, Riley, my studio director, she would drive in every other day to pick things up. She was dropping off drives to different clients in Manhattan. And so this pandemic has definitely brought my company closer together, I felt like. And yeah, I'm happy to report it's been pretty seamless for mixing.
Well, that's fantastic, because we wanted to talk about, the advantages, but also the disadvantages. But you also brought up clients and the human factor, and I sort of want to touch on that from two different perspectives. One, the client, and how do you convince them that things are secure? How do you communicate with them to make sure that you're all getting what you want, because you're not face to face, and it's hard to read people when you're not face to face. So why don't you guys just jump in? I know I just threw a lot at you, but who wants to jump in first?
Well, I could quickly,
Glenn, go
I
ahead.
can quickly tackle some of the security issues. Lucky for us, my partner is an IT expert, so he really spearheads the security aspect at FlavorLab. We have a co-location facility up in Hawthorne, outside of the city, with which is incredibly secure, with swipe cards and eye scan to get into the facility. We have I believe it's every 15 days we have an auto delete, so we don't keep things on the drives. We have a VPN security in-house. We have a whitelist IP address system as well. We have a two-factor verification system. I think the challenge with some of the security stuff is that the more security you put in place, the more hoops for our clients have to jump through to get what they need to get. And so I think there's that dance of, how much security do you want? We can give you as much security as you'd like, but also the ease of getting the files back and forth is also a consideration for us. So we've been, so far it's been very good, and we've been very secure with the co-location outside of Manhattan.
Okay. Dave, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll jump in on it. I mean, the one thing that's for myself that's been really interesting with this is security's gotten a lot easier to deal with. Being on-prem, secure, there's so many different layers of security that we're required to hit for MPA, TPN, and on-prem, the amount of equipment and infrastructure and just configuration that needs to be in place for us to get approved by these organizations is really difficult, and it takes time. And even just going through the audits, as things are catched, it may be, all right, we'll check in again in 3 weeks because we need to order hardware, we need to deploy it, we need to test it, and then report back. We've just finished up one of our security audits, and in a week, you can give us a list of things that they would like to see us adjust on our end. And because we're cloud-based, it's all in kind of a management panel. Like, we can control all of this from like a very simple front end. And I'm oversimplifying it. There is more to it than that. However, it is so much easier, and we're able to kind of respond to those requests a lot more real time than you would be able to on-prem. So it's actually been great for us in that regard. And I think things have been moving for quite a while with security, where there's an understanding that this has to be a consideration, this work from home type of scenario. And although I don't think that some of the bigger organizations quite have a solve for what that looks like yet, they don't really have all the standards in place, it's been a consideration, it's been thought about. And I think with the pandemic hitting, it kind of just cemented in, like, this is something that needs to be really thought through, so that we're prepared for it for the future, So I can't complain about the security stuff. It's been great. Again, we've been able to respond so fast for our clients, and whatever their needs are. So,
I mean, I'll jump in here and say that that one of the barriers to fully remote studios and workflows that we've been looking at in the past, probably about the last 10 years when we've kind of known that was the future of post-production, was this decentralized remote kind of setup, right? And one of the barriers to really going that far was always security. It was that we hadn't cracked security. We kind of had cracked most of the rest of it. We knew that we could, it was quite possible to, do most of it remotely. There was a little bit of psychological barriers there, with some people thinking, well, you can't possibly hear a mix unless you're on the stage. You can't possibly see the grade unless you're there, in the DI theater or whatever. And obviously, by necessity, that was overcome in the last year. And also there's been a lot of innovation that's also helped get that last mile. But security was always that big barrier to, full scale deployment, particularly at the high end studio level stuff. And there's still, if anyone's read the latest Movie Labs white paper, there's still a lot of discussion on how that's going to go. And technology is really just yet to catch up on some of that, essentially streaming and never, streaming the content from a central place, utilizing the cloud. There's also been discussions, on using other security systems, like, using the blockchain and things like that. But right now, we've actually gotten a really cool, like, working prototype of what I think we're going, a lot of us envisioned the future was going to look like anyway. We've got this working prototype. We are streaming directly to the client. We are streaming directly to the talent. All of these things that we thought, we were going to do at some point, but never got around to, there wasn't always that, I guess there wasn't such an incentive to actually, really innovate in that area. And so unless you were the kind of company that was doing it anyway, because it's fun, there wasn't that incentive there until last year. So yeah, that's been really exciting for me. And I think that's really, we've solved a lot of the security stuff. There's definitely, as Dave said, been some leeway in terms of the fact that people aren't in a facility per se, so the people aren't physically behind a swipe card. There is always the possibility that your kid could run in the back door and see something that you're working on or whatever. There's definitely a lot of leeway there, and a lot of that was psychological. Again, you don't have a swipe card to your house. No, you don't. But you probably are in a room where you're not going to see anything. No one else is going to see anything. And beyond that, I think we've actually, it's been easier than we thought it was going to be. I don't think there's, nothing is leaving the secure facility, and it never did, and it still isn't, generally speaking.
Josh, did you want to touch on that? And you had 2 shows immediately that you had to keep secure. So I know you talked about evolving the workflows, but where you're at now, do you see that moving toward the future? And then I'm going to open that up to everybody else. What are you learning now that will remain? We're talking about the future of post. So how are you evolving that workflow and the security?
Sure, yeah, it's a great question. And I think my answer probably dovetails a lot of what Dave and Katie and Glenn were just talking about. There's 2 problems that I feel like we need to solve every day, primarily in the editorial space. One of them is content protection, and the other one is what I refer to almost like hospitality. And that's for the people that are editing and doing the work, as well as the people that are producing and engaging with the content and giving feedback. And sort of finding that middle ground where there's a level of satisfaction with the security and the preciousness that our media is given, especially the original camera files. And then there's the ease of collaboration. Each show has a different balance of that. And I am happy to give prescriptions and best practices and anecdotal, but every single project I've worked on since March has gone differently. And on every job, something has gone wrong with the technology. Thankfully, we haven't, lost content or anything like that, but that's because we're treating it the same way. When media comes to us, whether we're doing the dailies or not, it stays in one place, which is a fire-safe, vaulted, secure location with the same level of content protection that existed pre-pandemic. What we're talking about securing is the next step of that. It's stepped down. And we know that we're able to communicate with our finishing partners in a way that that handoff is secure. And those are the areas that I feel like are getting the most attention, as opposed to the way that we're providing offline media for editorial. That's a less scrutinized aspect of the process. Not to say that it's not important, but the emphasis there is on speed, it's on utility, and it's on flexibility. One of the great outcomes of all of this is that I'm able, from my home to collaborate with artists who live in many different places. And we are able to get them what they need for their specific home configuration in a way that enables them to work as if they were at the post house. So we are adapting our processes, but from a content and protection standpoint, we are recreating something that we had already done. The tools that we use to do that vary. If somebody lives in Oregon, they're gonna need something different. If somebody lives next door to me, they're gonna need something different. If their internet service provider is one, there might be other things. If they have a dedicated IP address, we might be able to level up the way that we're getting stuff to them. But all of this really boils down to transparency, communication, and understanding. Shows that I've worked on that mandate the way things are going to have to go oftentimes are confronted with more obstacles than shows that are inherently flexible from the onset. And that's, I think, our obligation as partners to these shows, to provide tools, but also to be willing to adapt, to hear problems and solve for them, and to not let the fact that we are working the way that we are right now impact the quality of work.
I think one of the things that we've all noted is that, as much as we talk about technology, and we've all been asked a lot of questions about technology, we are in the customer service business. That's what we do in post-production, and the human factor of what's happened in the last year and what's happening this year is actually far more interesting and far more important, I think, than how we've solved for going remote and that sort of thing, because we kind of always knew what that was going to be, and we kind of know now what it is because we're working that way. But a lot of people are asking, like, what's the client experience like? Like, what's the talent experience like? And how is that changing? And what's going to happen when some people can go back into the facility? Those things, I think, is really where we have to, like you say, the flexibility of it is something that we've really had to realize that now we're still adapting. We're still adapting now that people want to have a hybrid sort of way of working. And so that constant adaptation between different clients, different talent, different needs, and the changing world that we're in, I think is something that is often underestimated.
Exactly. And actually we had a question submitted, and we're going to get to some of the others when we're toward the end of this, but someone was wondering if there are any implications, the clients are missing attending sessions. So how are you guys all dealing with that?
Yes. I mean, I can start with that a little bit and probably throw to Josh, actually, because I know that
Sure.
You're talking a bit about that too as well. But, I think some people are really happy at home. It really works for them. And they are enjoying the flexibility. They're enjoying not having to commute. And there are other people who are really struggling at home for often the same reasons, it works for some people and it doesn't for others. It's different people's situations, it's different people's personalities, it's different people's needs, and it's different technology, it's people's technology needs as well. And so we absolutely have both talent and clients who are super excited, super jazzed to get back to the office. And in fact, we have had people who have come into the office. We have had colorists who just can't work from their home studio for whatever reason. Some people have kids, and some people don't have the space, and some people just need that going into the office and having that separation. So we have had people going into the office and working remotely with clients, but in the office. And there are certainly clients who are asking to do their final reviews now in person. And so that's really what I'm seeing the trend towards for this year, is that a majority of the work is being done remotely, and then final reviews are being done in person. And like I say, there are some clients who want to come in, there are some clients who never want to come in, and the fact that we've kind of set things up now such that we can give people options has actually been really awesome, and it's really good. I think it's also being more inclusive to different people's needs, and it's allowing everybody to kind of work at their best, whatever it is that whatever way it is that they prefer, and whatever's right for the show as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, when you're at home, you're at home. And when you're in a session, I think there's an expectation about what's going to get done. And sometimes I know, from what I understand about Glenn, your point of view, and I'd love to hear afterwards, but it's really, sometimes there's sort of that need to perform both for the client and the artist when you're in the room together. And it's really lovely to bring a little bit more empathy to the session and to sort of see people for who they are and what they are, and to give a little bit more understanding about what might be happening on the other side of the door for each person in a session. And so some things, don't happen on time, and sometimes that's okay. And I think what we all do to make space for that is really to give a little bit more care to our schedule, to give a little bit more understanding, maybe to check in a little bit more beforehand to make sure that today's the day. And if we get into the session and it's not the day, we need to make that okay too. I think what's happening is we're starting to see people for who they are and where they are while we're working. And I wouldn't be surprised if the quality of work goes up from that, because when it's not right, that shows. So Glenn, I know you were talking a little bit about this in one of our earlier conversations. What are you finding, for the in the room stuff?
Yeah, Josh, I think the in the room stuff is, the pandemic has accelerated the idea that we could work on our own independently and more efficiently. I feel that for us, I haven't, since this has started, I can't tell you, I can't count on one hand who's wanted to physically come in to approve mixes. I've had a couple of voiceovers that people have wanted a booth for, but nobody has asked to come in for a final mix. Now, this was sort of trending this way, pre-pandemic, where, we have this beautiful space on 23rd Street and all these amenities, and people are coming in for half a day to approve the mix. So we were thinking in our heads a long time ago is, as you know, Josh, very well, better than all of us, real estate is incredibly expensive, especially in Manhattan and Brooklyn. And we've all at some time or another have owned a chunk of real estate in Manhattan. And I think it's funny. I mean, I remember a conversation I had with a client of mine in the 40s who told me that, I'm so sorry, but you're on 23rd Street and it's just too far for us to travel. Mm-hmm. And, think about that today and what's going on right now. That would be an absurd conversation to have, right? So for us, yeah, it's been exciting. It's worked out. It's been very incredibly efficient. I find that all my team is more focused. They're at home. I trust them. I trust that everybody is doing their job. We mentioned the other day about communications. Google Hangout is my best friend. I mean, we're constantly talking to each other on Google Hangout. Everybody is in the mix. And as far as tools, Randy, as far as getting clients hip to tools that we use, I mean, we, as a third party, we got to be great listeners, right? We have to react to if Josh wants me to set up a system a certain way to deliver, we're going to do it that way. And we're going to figure out how to do that. We have best practices as far as how we would suggest through dropship and, secure server. But a lot of our clients are saying, this is the way we're comfortable working. And to be successful, we have to be great listeners, and we have to adapt to the way, if Katie wants us to ship a certain way, we're going to do it that way. So yeah, I'm happy to report that nobody is knocking on our door. Nobody wants to come in person. And we're fine with that. We're fine with that. I think there are social implications that are really sad, because look, I'm a hugger. I'm a high fiver. I love to get in a room with people. We used our space on 23rd Street. We had epic parties. I mean,
Yes, you did.
And Katie was a part of many of them. But I'll tell you real quickly, we had a party called March Madness. It was a basketball party. It was the silliest little party we'd ever throw, and it was the most epic party. We had a little basketball net, And everybody loved to participate in this challenge. It was a basketball net, and you get a silly little prize at the end of the night, but it was epic. And we had 5-6 years going. It was a tradition. And it was during March. It was March Madness. And so when the pandemic hit, this was my first taste of like how off kilter all of this was. We had people, we sent out the invite, and then we realized, people were canceling their parties. And that's the first moment that I got really sad. I was like, I can't believe we're not going to have our epic March Madness party. This is when we all get together and hang out and drink beers. And we were getting RSVPs that were like +1, +2. And I called my partner up. I said, could you believe this? People want to come, but there's a pandemic. I had to tell these people, I'm so sorry, but we, for your safety, for the company's safety, we can't have the party. And that was my first taste of, wow, things are going to be different. Things are going to change. And I'll just never forget. I mean, that was like a benchmark for me, that people were RSVPing that they wanted to come to our party. And this is the big pivot. This is the moment for us. So I miss that. I do miss that. I like to hang out in person, and that's why I really when Katie asked me to do this, I appreciated this, because we don't do this enough with each other. And I always try to make it a point to get on the phone or Zoom at some point and just look at somebody else's eyes, understand who we're working with, because it's become so anonymous. Even before the pandemic. Now, the pandemic has accelerated all of this, but it was we still didn't get a chance to meet a lot of people, especially for the mix. I think for Josh and Katie, there's more involvement because there's editing involved, and we're last on the food chain. So we can, I think audio is at an advantage right now. The file sizes is a lot less. We have a lot less to deal with. We have a lot less baggage. So we are streamlined. We get low res H.264 quick times to deal with. But, you're dealing with massive files. And, that's a real consideration. So I think, we're lean and mean, and we're able to do it because of that. And so, while I do miss 23rd Street, I miss the parties, I miss hanging out, but I'm optimistic. I really am. And I think that I hope we can engage more and do more of these conversations and learn how everybody's feeling. And, and I'll just say really quickly, lastly, one of my colleagues said to me, I like, and I think Josh said this earlier, I like being able to look at somebody in their habitat. And I just feel there's more intimacy, there's more connection, and I can empathize. Somebody has a kid, a son, a daughter, and we're all in this together. We're all, and what it comes down to is that you need a great team. You need the best possible team, whether it's your in-house team or people, people you're collaborating with that you trust, and that there's not a lot of formality. I can call Katie anytime, day or night, if I have a question. And I think that's sort of where all this is going, is that you need to be, and we talked last time about the nuances of getting to know somebody. And that's a little bit more tricky with all of this. But again, I think, being a great producer is being able to figure out how to do all that. And that, Katie, that's why I think you're so successful, is because you have empathy for the people that you're working with, and Josh as well, and Dave. I mean, it's being a great listener, opening up and understanding what people are going through, and that we're all going through this together.
Absolutely. And I think that brings us to the future of Post. So what do we see happening in the next, I don't know, maybe toward the end of the year into next year? Do you see it still being a hybrid sort of thing? I mean, there are people that are loving working remotely. There are people, and we're going to address that in one of the questions, that are struggling a little bit. So what do each of you see happening going forward? And Dave, let's start with you.
Yeah, I definitely think I think each kind of area of post-production is going to see things trend a little bit differently. But generally speaking, I do believe that we're going to, as much as I think a lot of people are saying, oh, I can't wait to get back to the office. I can't wait to get back to the office. I think what we're going to find is that hybrid model is going to be the most successful for most companies, most situations. And that there's a lot of people that are really anxious to get back to the office and are going to find that, like, hey, it's not so great going back to the office. I'm actually realizing the amount of time I was losing in my commute. I'm forgetting about the certain conveniences that you had being home. You had a little bit more ability to kind of balance work and life, which is not easy in our industry. So I think it's going to be interesting to hear stories from people that are very excited to go back and then hear how they feel once they actually do. And I think we talked about this the other day, Katie. I think it's going to be the type of thing where it's going to swing very heavy. Everyone's excited getting back to the office, and then it's going to readjust to somewhere in the center where, you know, companies are going to have to allow for some flexibility. Let people choose, like, where are you most comfortable working? Where are you most effective working? And every day might be a little different. You may have a day where it's just not a good situation being home for you to be as effective as you need to be, and you need a space to be able to go to put in the focus, or get on a quiet call with a client. So I really don't know that I could see in visual effects. I'll speak for specifically. I don't see any point in the future where it's going to go back remotely the way it was pre-pandemic. I think at best it's going to be a hybrid model with options for people to come and go as they need. And I think we're also going to find there's a lot of companies that are just realizing that the cost of real estate, the cost of hardware and the electricity, and all of these costs that go into having your own on-prem, you know, data centers, let's say, it may not really be worth it unless you have all of those bodies sitting in seats taking up that space. And so I think you're going to see a lot of companies starting to liquidate some of their assets, trimming down their space, or looking more like WeWorks type situations. Like, we'll get some space when we need it and we'll let it go when we don't. So it'll be interesting to see, because and as I said, it's going to look different, I think, for sound as it might be for VFX as it is for editorial. But it'll be interesting to see at some point. I think they'll all find a sweet spot, and I believe it's going to be probably more of a hybrid model.
Yeah, I mean, visual effects, you were always the least client attended department in post, right? I mean, you were hardly ever client attended anyway. So for you guys to just go fully remote was not such a big deal, really, and we're probably more likely to, you know, to stay that way for that reason. But you know, I think for the rest of us, and then you look at someone like Josh, who's the most client attended, you know, in editorial, it's going to be really interesting to see where that lands. I mean, for us, it's basically what Dave said. You know, we'll probably end up coming from, you know, completely out of the, you know, completely work from home to probably heading back to completely in the office for a minute and then coming back somewhere in the middle. And for us, you know, for my team, it's all about, we've invested so much in people working from home. We've invested so much in the infrastructure, the innovation, and everything else that we've needed to do to solve for that. And so we want to keep that in place and allow people the more flexibility. And the thing is that in this business, the more flexible and agile you are, the more successful you are anyway. And that's really been proven in the last year. And it's like, it's presented us a lot of great opportunities. I think we do need to try and go to have the opportunity for people to go back to the office, especially because it might be great for some people, it's terrible for others. And it also really, one of the challenges that we're having is training some of our more entry-level staff, right? If you're not there, that can be a much bigger challenge for them. And we need to get that pipeline of talent moving. And if we can't offer people really good, strong training opportunities and professional development opportunities, you know, that's going to be a problem for us down the line. So, you know, but I think, you know, like Dave said, for us in color, we're going to end up somewhere in the middle and give people that full on flexibility. But I think it'd be really interesting to hear what Josh has to say about that.
Well, I hope I can satisfy the hype. I think, you know, we run a business that's based on creating an environment that cultivates people's creativity and collaboration. So our investment is not in physical infrastructure. Our investment is in making the context with which people are working together successful. And that predates the pandemic. The reason that the spaces that we have are built the way that they are is around flexible ways of working together. We don't have 17, 18 rooms that are exactly the same. There's nuance to the way that our space is designed. And what I can tell you is that the space that we'll be coming back to will not exactly resemble the space that we left. Every project that we start has a path back to post because that's what's being asked for. And as COVID compliance continues to get more robust on the productions themselves, what you're getting is because we see people right after the shoot is over. You're getting people who are leaving set that they've been on successfully for 20, 30 days in person. And to tell them, well, hold on a minute, we're only all remote, I'm the front line of that pushback. And they're saying, well, wait, you guys don't have a CCO. There's not, we'll just get our temperature checked and be careful and go into our room. And people are chomping at the bit to get back to post, especially for the type of TV shows and films that we make at Senior Post. And what we want to do is get there safely, but also get the best possible outcome. For me, it's really devastating that we have had a dip in our ability to develop emerging talent. Mentorship is really hard on a Zoom, and it's great for this because we can all meet and make an hour to talk. And that's not, there's no commute for this participation, but none of the shows I've been on have had edit room assists. There's no post PAs. It's very hard to share your timeline from an editor to an assistant editor. Even that collaboration, which is almost binary, in most post environments, is really protracted. And, the post supervision and the post producers, if you have to insert yourself into a process to get notes from a network or a producer, internalize them, and then communicate them, that could take all day. So what you're getting is a lot of the methods of communication and collaboration and offline are being rerouted because we're all remote. People want to go back and try that out too. So I think what you're getting is an appetite to get back into the room because it's what we're used to, and it's not great to all be home all the time. And I think we know that inherently. We're all rationalizing and coping with that in our different ways. And for some people, it feels good to say, well, this is just what we're going to do. But the truth of the matter is, there's a reason that these places were built the way they were to begin with, because it's an effective way to make things. And it might not be perfect for the future, but there's a slice of that that's important. And certain projects and certain people need to be in a room to be their best selves. If you look at the tech, not that I love to talk about it, but the tech that we're bringing forth is about approximating being in a room. When you go into a session, it's called a room that you're going into to watch an artist work and to give feedback and to have a dialogue. In this setting, we're apprehensive about talking over one another. We're being very respectful about people's space and time. And sometimes it's hard to bring your full self into a video chat. And I'm looking forward to getting back to post, just to be around people like Glenn said, but also to see what works. And if what works is everyone's home until the fine cut, and we come in to go from fine cut to picture lock to turnover to Katie and Glenn and Dave, then great. I've never been rigid in the way that I run my business, and I don't plan on it now, but I do think that there's a very strong appetite to see people, whether that's family and friends or collaborators. There is an isolating element, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention that this is not as fun as being in a room together.
I'm going to speak real quick to that just because of the model of our department. It's like we are set up to be at home. That's it for break and enter. And I do agree completely. And this is funny because I've had a lot of conversation about this. I've been a huge advocate for this model, like work from home, cloud-based type scenario. I miss terribly. I miss working with my team in person. But I think at least, and I'll speak personally just for myself, I think it's the type of thing where I've had to kind of weight the pros and cons of being in the office versus the pros and cons of being at home. And it's like the things that I miss about being in the office, I can't get any other way. I really miss them, but I think the benefits that I gain on the other side might outweigh it. You know what I mean? Yeah. And again, I'm going to probably speak in some ways for all of us on this, but in visual effects, the hours that we have to put in at times for deliveries are insane, right? Mm-hmm. Adding a commute on top of that is, kind of tips it over. And then I have a family, I have a young family, so this is literally the first time where I've been every night I can put my kids to bed. Every night I can be here for dinner. It doesn't mean I'm done working. It doesn't mean I'm done working. I may have to hop back online, but I can be a part of their life. And that's literally never been an option for me in my career. I've been absolutely stuck to large cities, Los Angeles and New York specifically. And I've been stuck to, working on-prem and having to miss those moments. So for me, it has been bittersweet because I am a huge people person, Glenn, like you said. I'm a hugger. I love like the personal touch, and really being able to get to know people is kind of the fun part of what I think all of us do.
Yeah,
totally.
But what I gain from this, I just can't see. I could never see going back the other way for myself. There's just, I've never had balance like I have now. And because of that, for me, to your point, Josh, is like, there are hurdles to this. And even with us being completely designed to work this way, there's still hurdles. And I just see it as the type of thing, like, it's technology. We find a hurdle, we work on it, and we solve it. And then we're going to find another hurdle, we're going to work on it, we're going to solve it. So, and look, is it ever going to be perfect? Probably not. But I do think that we're going to see more and more things, new technology come out that's going to help assist with some of this. I've had some really funny ideas, Josh, about the communication you were talking about. I miss that too. Like, I miss being able to be in my office and be having a conversation with our head of production, for example. I can still be working here and we're talking. We have ideas. We're going back and forth. And, I could totally see the whole like AOL Instant Messenger type thing kind of come back, not as a chat, as a vocal, an audible room that you step into and you can just talk with your team. You can continue working, but you can talk with your team. I think finding solutions like that to solve some of this is really important, because I think we all agree, like, it's probably not going to go completely back the other way. So rather than, for me anyway, rather than saying like, oh, this, I missed this, like, how do I solve this? We talked about, young talent, super difficult. That's not like a thing that like just haven't figured out yet, how we nail that. It's been great for us because seats aren't a problem anymore. Real estate space, it's not a problem. Like, I can make room for juniors to come in places that I may not have been able to before. So it's like, I can find more opportunity for them, but how do we train them in the same way? How do we give them that, that level of collaboration that they need to really move their career along and really, grow within the company? It's really tricky. But I think those are the things that I think we're going to see more and more solutions for. I think technology is going to help. We got a lot of bright people that work in post-production, and I think we're gonna find solutions to at least satisfy some of what we're missing. It may not replace the in-person, but it'll satisfy it.
Dave, you touched on the kids, and that really kind of hit me in the heart, because I have 3 small children. I know Josh has children as well. And that has been a luxury to be able to walk. I'm in my studio right now. Upstairs, they're on remote learning. So at any moment, I could walk up and give them a hug, and that's awesome. But it's also finding that balance between, where's that boundary between your daddy's always working and it's literally 24/7. And it's like, I do see that as an issue, as a social, implication of what's happening. Like, yes, this is great that we could still do what we need to do, but when it becomes 24/7 and it impedes on hanging with the kids, there's definitely, I think I have to ask myself that question: is there a line, and can I satisfy that line? As far as no commuting, that's awesome. It's expensive to go to New York City. It's expensive. Let's face it. If you're working in Connecticut or New Jersey and you have to take a train in and to go to Grand Central, I mean, those are costs that you're saving, that we're all saving. So that's on the plus side, right? And you have to weigh the plus and the minus. But most people I talk to say, we love the commute. It's real easy to go from one bedroom to the next. But I think at the cost of that is, where do you draw the line on Saturday and Sunday? When, I shouldn't come down here and be playing piano. And it, admittedly, it's hard. It's hard for me because it is such a all-consuming 24/7. And they know, oh, daddy's at work. So we're trying to negotiate that. That's a constant, negotiation.
Okay, so we have a lot of questions. They're diverse. I think you guys can see these questions. Glenn, I think there are 2 that maybe you could address. One is from another audio studio,
Sure.
who isn't necessarily enjoying this as much as you. And maybe you could share some things with that person. And then also, as a second part of that, someone wanted to know what you're using for review, for audio review. They've been remote as well. They have a handful of clients that do come in for the final mix. So sort of the hybrid thing. So if you could just tackle that in any which way you
Sure.
want.
Well, Randy, when you say not enjoying, you mean the process of where we're at home?
Well, yeah,
Remote
I think
mixing?
struggling a little bit. So he said that they're not necessarily enjoying working this way, and that they're looking forward to a more sustainable way to work. And also, seeing the lessons learned now and then applying them to the post-COVID world. But
Gotcha.
yeah, and it could go back to the personality thing and wanting to be with people.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that question and that comment. I spoke to an editor the other day that we got pretty deep, and he was saying he's depressed. I mean, this is not working out being at home. And I know everybody has a different barometer of what a lens that they're seeing through. So I really empathize with that question. I appreciate him bringing that up. Again, I am, I try to wake up and do affirmations every morning, and I hopefully bring that to my team as well. But there is definitely an isolation issue for a lot of people, and let's be honest about that. That's happening. As far as the tech part of the part two of the question, we're generally FTPing mixes remotely. Clients are approving mixes on different sets of headphones, different sets of speakers. It is the Wild West, as anybody in audio land can attest to. And so nobody has, there isn't one standard we've found for as far as approving mixes, but there's a lot of conversation back and forth. There's a lot of occasionally inconsistencies. Somebody might put something in mono when they lay it back. And these are problems that have existed since the beginning of time, but it's very important that the audio house is every step of the way communicating either through Evercast or Frame.io. We use Collaborate as well a lot. Again, this is all dependent on our partners and what their comfort level is, but we're generally mixing, 5.1 stereo 48 kilohertz 24-bit files, and we're up-resing it through our secure drop ship, and they are approving the mixes. And Randy, honestly, we haven't had anybody really push back on the mixing. I mean, and I think part of that is because we've been doing it for so long, and I'm sure a lot of these folks are also doing it for a long time. We built trust. We have a lot of rapport with our clients. We understand the shorthand. They understand, like I always say, listen to an approved mix before you listen to anything new on any new system that you're working with. I mean, that's a good barometer as well. If the bass sounds too heavy, well, check your speakers. What else are you listening to? It might just be your speakers. It might not be the mix per se. So we've gotten very good at preempting, holding our clients' hands so that they understand that their frame of reality and the listening environment that they're in is as close and as accurate as possible. And again, with the caveat that they're in an apartment, they're not in a fully calibrated room with Genelec speakers. So I empathize with all the mixers out there that have to go over that hurdle. Back in the day, pre-pandemic, people were approving mixes on iPhones. I mean, creative directors would be at the beach. They would be in the Caribbean, and we would say, "You got to be kidding me! How are you able to hear any of the low frequencies?" So that's an issue that we've been challenged with since the beginning of time with people not coming in.
Sure. Okay. Well, let's pivot to the business side. We've had a couple of questions about the volume of business during COVID and also sales. So who wants to tackle that?
Okay, to start. Yeah, so I think, as we all know, there was a huge dip for a while. When things couldn't go into production, we were seeing a bit of a dip, and we're still seeing, it's still definitely less stuff happening than there was, this time last year, because of the fact that, there's not so many things going into production. That said, there are different things going into production, and the work that we're seeing is, not necessarily the same shows and the same kind of productions that we would have seen. And now what we're seeing is a lot more documentaries, particularly a lot more indies, And, you know, that's probably the majority of what we've seen. TV is both in TV and features. We've seen a lot more TV than features. Although that's coming back a little bit with documentary features in particular. So I would say that in terms of the sales pipeline, yes, there was a dip, it's coming back, and largely what's coming back is it's pivoted. So some things have been put off for like a year and are now going to shoot overseas, and they're coming back for post. But we're probably seeing, you know, still seeing a bit of a dip in that. There are a lot of things that just people would rather just put off until we can do it properly. But then, yeah, there's a lot of opportunity then for, like I say, some of the documentaries in particular and unscripted work to come in. Josh, would you agree?
Yeah, I think things got awfully quiet in March and April and May. Let's remember what preceded all of this was a huge influx of places to put film and TV shows. We are in a world now where there are a lot more homes for your show or your film. And as a result, those places all need content, whatever that content is. So there's certainly an appetite to be making things. What I'm seeing now is sort of a step forward from the manic planning that I would describe the summer as, to some more pointed, model-based option solutions, for lack of a better word. You know, we're saying, can we do this way now? Can we start it here and then plan to go back to a post house? Can we do the whole thing with 3 editors? Can we do it with 1 editor for 3 times the amount of time? We're gaming the variables now in a way that feels a lot more actionable. I think it's very clear that there's a tangible fatigue for the amount of work that's being made. People want to do more. And so the restlessness is now manifesting itself in a lot more conversations about opportunities. I am certainly seeing less deal flow than I saw in previous years at this time, but the type of work that is happening currently and that I'm in conversations about are new and exciting types of things. And that's really cool to see. I am finding that there is a lot more inter-company collaboration, and I couldn't be more grateful for that. I don't think that, at least for myself, I don't see us trying to build a place that everything can happen inside. I don't think that the all-in one-stop shop is needed when there isn't necessarily such an emphasis on physicality. I can work with Dave where Dave is, and I can provide the same experience to the people who are in my facility as a result of that. And that's such an exciting thing. So that there are less barriers to collaboration, to me, is actually making the possibility of making deals and work happen a lot more practical and probable. So for me, I think this is a really great thing.
Okay, great. And we're getting close to being done, but there has been a couple of questions about people starting in the industry, how they could continue to find work if they're new. Should they wait? What should they be doing to get attention and to get experience? And then we'll have to wrap up.
I think it's been a really tough time for those people while we've all been remote, and we've all been unable to really give juniors and our interns especially the kind of experience and learning experience that they've needed, because we've all been been caught up so much in trying to learn ourselves and to really figure out how to communicate with each other as well during this time. I think now that most of our teams, as far as what I understand, have really got the hang of that. I think we're starting to better be able to take care of our more junior members in the industry. And like I did mention before, that pipeline is so important. We cannot lose a year's worth of talent, moving up the industry just because everything's kind of stopped. And we are failing some of our younger talent by really not focusing on giving them those opportunities to learn. So I'm really looking forward to us being able to get back to a hybrid model of going back into the office a little bit, giving people more opportunities, and also taking advantage of the way that we have figured out how to collaborate. Now we can collaborate in our learning opportunities. At Nice Shoes, for example, I've been doing a study group every week where somebody talks about something that they're an expert in and anybody else can kind of come in and listen. We bring in outside
Great.
people from different facilities. You know,
Wow.
those kind of things are something that we're doing because we're not having that opportunity to learn from each other in person. So as long as we keep focusing on trying to do that, and we're going to have to be proactive about it. And I think also some of the juniors need to also really advocate for themselves better than ever.
Yes, I want to just touch on that really quick. I think it's about mutual advocacy, both, you know, people who feel like and believe that they're ready for the next step in their career. I think now is the time to really shoot that shot. And more to the point, people who are in positions of providing opportunities need to go to bat and advocate for new and diverse and exciting collaborators. I think that it is totally possible to take a chance on somebody. And as these shows aren't bound by how many people can you seat in a place, if you can figure out how to make the money work, I think there's a lot of great opportunities for people to get a shot at something. And they might not be, you know, lead editing an episode of a show, but you know, what's the new edit room assistant? At least from my purview, seems to be a really exciting conversation right now. And you know, hit people up, right? Like we're all home. Don't be shy is what I would say.
I would just piggyback off that, Josh, and say absolutely, juniors should be proactive as much as possible. The last few, in order for us to scale and evolve as a company, we have to find talent that is kicking ass from the ground up. And I take this very personal because my partner of 20 plus years was an intern. So I value the internship and the mentorship programs greatly. And I just would say basic common denominators, like be sincere, be humble, reach out to people like ourselves. And you know, like yesterday I answered an email. I get a lot of emails, but I got something that I felt was from the heart and felt that somebody needed to get a response back. So absolutely, this is a fertile time right now because we're all at home and we don't physically need to be in a building to work together. So think about it that way. The glass is half full. We could be working outside of, you know, New York, New Jersey, up and down the East Coast, California. So I think this is a great time, but not a sort of cold email situation kind of. I'm not advocating that. I'm advocating doing your homework, really understanding who it is you're talking to, and I think you can get a lot of conversations started that way because I know we're interested in meeting people that way. So
one thing I'll add to that is one thing that I've always told you know, junior talent is the best way to get most junior talent coming in. They're not going to come in with all the experience and all the chops to do the job necessarily. So get people to invest in you personally, to personally care for you because you're a good person. You work hard. You have great work ethic. You're a team player, right? You need to be able to show those things and get them to personally invest. And I feel like because of the situation we're in right now and the fact that I'm looking at all of you in your own home, there is this like personal touch that I normally would never get with you. So find the opportunity and the method of getting in contact with somebody that could potentially hire you. And maybe they won't, maybe they can't right now, but see if they can set up a Zoom call with you. Take 5 minutes. We're all in that mode right now. We're exhausted of it, I'm sure, but we're all in that mode right now. Like literally your opportunity to be in their living room with them in their own personal space. There's no better time to build a personal relationship with somebody. And I know that sounds weird when it's virtual, but there's no better time to be able to do that and get these people to invest in you and be looking for opportunities to advocate for you and find placement. And you know, I think it's really a matter of, you know, just showing some confidence, being willing to step out of your box and say, you know what, I'm going to throw myself out there and see what opportunities are going to come. But definitely being proactive is huge.
Sounds great. Guys, thank you so much for participating. Katie, Glenn, Dave, Josh, appreciate it. Thank you to everybody that sent in questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to them all. We tried, we just ran out of time. So maybe we'll do another, who knows? Thanks everybody.
thank you, Randy.
Thank you, Randy.
Thanks, everyone.